I'm your host Sana, and today's conversation is all about intentional living. Now, what I mean by intentional living, about slowing down, choosing well, and building lives that are more peaceful, purposeful, and joyful. Now, listeners, my guest today is Steve Ward. He is the founder and executive director of STEPS Ministries, a non-profit dedicated to helping individuals and families live more intentionally, grow closer to God, and prevent addiction. Now, listener, Steve's journey is deeply personal. After battling addiction within his own family, he turned his struggles into a calling to help others. And now, through his books, Steps, A Daily Journey to a Better Life, and Next Right Steps, his podcast, and then his work coaching thousands of individuals out there, Steve is sharing practical, proven principles for living life better. One step at a time, of course. So, with that, Steve, I'm really, really honored to have you here and welcome to the Mindful Living.
Zana, thank you so much. You used several of my favorite words in your introduction. Purposeful, being intentional, staying aware, connected to the moment. Great words. So wonderful introduction, and I look forward to our conversation.
I'm so happy to know that, and thank you for your kind words, Steve. And
Mm.
um, intentional living. I mean, yes, the words peaceful, purposeful, and joyful. They're so simple words, yet sometimes we kind of overlook. We kind of don't realize that we are devoid of all these words, of all these beautiful qualities in our life. So your book and Steps Ministries, it's all about intentional living, but it is also about prevention and healing. So if you can share with us the inspiration behind Steps and what you hope people take away from it.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. One is, like I said, I'm a firm believer in living intentionally, and the good news for me growing up is I've always been, I guess, by nature and also by training, sort of intentional. I was trained as an engineer and was in business. So I was used to thinking about intentionality in a business context or in a we need to get this project done by this certain time kind of a context. But I think, like many people, for a long time, I didn't know what I didn't know, that intentionality also applies to just how we experience life on a day-to-day basis, right? We sometimes the people who are most intentional tend to get, overly busy and very focused on the task at hand and so interested in accomplishing something that they lose being part of the moment and being aware of themselves and the people around them. You also mentioned a couple of great words like, peace and joy. We can, if we're not in balance, right, we can be so focused on getting things done that things like peace and joy fade into the background, right? And our daily existence just becomes one of hustle and bustle and, doing things and accomplishment rather than also enjoying the journey along the way. So a lot of good thoughts, Sam, in what you're talking about and in what you do. So.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And I really resonate with what you are saying, that it's not just about avoiding problems, but it is moving forward, you know, towards something better. So it's more of a proactive rather than reactive approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And at Steps, we have several methodologies that we put together from researching a lot of different disciplines. But one of them is called PACES, PACES. And we use that whenever someone is coming up on a change in their life. We do a lot of education and training with parents, but also just with individuals. And the word PACES is an acronym. It's the letters stand for the P is for be prepared. And that's really about the concept of being proactive, is to anticipate, the challenges we're going to face, in this next period of our lives to be ready for it. The A in PACES is to be aware, right? To be aware of the situation around us, the people around us, but also to be self-aware of how we're feeling and the emotions so that we don't just react impulsively to those. The C in PACES is to be connected, to make sure that in any conversation or in any relationship that we are thinking about concepts like empathy and connecting to the other person where they are rather than being focused on our own agenda. The E in PACES is to be educated to know we're going to experience new things in our life. But to be thoughtful about those, sometimes we need to pay attention and be ready for those situations. And the final S in PACES is for steps, which is really about being intentional, is to take simple steps that move us in the right direction. So even our methodologies and the way we go about doing things, echo a lot of the concepts and principles that you're talking about.
Mm, that really sounds effective. And when we talk about addiction, Steve, since you have experienced addiction in within your own family, so addiction not only deals with substance abuse, but it can be with work, it can be with anything, maybe negativity or social media, so many stuff out there. We can be addicted because there could be multiple reasons behind that. Maybe some kind of ingrained trauma, or some kind of uh, you know n- unfinished anything, any feeling within your soul, which is kind of getting you into that rabbit hole, and then you are kind of judging yourself and asking yourself this question, that why it is happening to me only. So you talk about a lot about simple steps that can help people live better. And also, I really appreciate, Steve, that steps addresses the whole person: physical, emotional, spiritual. So why it is so important to look at well-being holistically, especially when it comes to preventing addiction, or healing from our struggles or trauma.
Yeah. So obviously, I think we share a lot of the same thoughts. I believe, people have an inaccurate view of addiction, right? A lot of people think that addiction means someone either has an alcohol or drug problem that's so severe that they aren't able to function in life, and maybe they're in a gutter somewhere and they're just absolutely totally consumed by their addiction of choice. But the definition of addiction is when we have a habit that we do over and over again that has negative consequences and we find it very hard to stop, which means, guess what? We all have those, right? I firmly believe that we're all addicted to something, because, again, most people label addiction as either alcohol or a substance, right? That's consuming their life. But addiction can very well be with the behavior. You mentioned a couple, right? I will talk to business leaders, and some of them will confess that they're workaholics, and they're not saying that like they're bragging on how hard they work. They will say, I work, 65 or 70 or 75 hours a week. It's where my sense of identity comes from. I know it's hurting my family and my marriage, but I can't stop because so that's a compulsive addiction to work. And the behavior could be lots of things. It could be people pleasing, or codependency, or pornography, or it could be spending money. You could even be addicted to something like adrenaline. In other words, when there is a behavior that you are absolutely dependent on for you to deal with life in a healthy and a balanced way, in many cases, that's an addiction.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And you have worked with so many people over the years. So, what are some of the most common barriers you see that keep people from living intentionally? And how do you help them overcome those barriers?
Yeah. Well, we're all designed differently, right? So some of us tend to live, more naturally in the moment and even be impulsive at times. And some of us are a little more thoughtful and methodical, and that's well and good. We all have our own personality, our own strengths and weakness. That's well and good, right? But wherever we are on that spectrum, being intentional just means rather than just reacting emotionally or impulsively or compulsively, I'm going to be more thoughtful about things, right? And you can be obviously we should be intentional on the big things, right? Um, you know, sometimes people are intentional. They may be intentional about their jobs, or may be intentional about how they plan their money, but then they're not very intentional in other things, right? They're not intentional in their relationships. They take, they take relationships for granted. And all of a sudden, as they get older, they get into their 40s or 50s or something, and they look around and they don't really have any close friends or, because they've just been so consumed by other things. Or we aren't intentional about our own about self-care and taking care of ourselves, right? And we can be a better friend, a better family member. We can be better at work if we're also concentrating on keeping ourself in a good condition. And as you said, that means holistically, right? That means certainly emotionally, but also mentally, socially, spiritually, and personally. And most people really aren't intentional about those areas, or if they are, they have blind spots. So I talk to lots of people who, seem to really have a lot of the aspects of life. They seem to have it all together, but inside they're not very self aware. They're not. They don't have a lot of emotional intelligence in terms of how they interact with other people. So they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know that they're missing a lot of the peace and joy that life is meant to bring by, by being more thoughtful and intentional and balanced and aware. So it affects all aspects of our life, right? And so I would urge anyone, whether you're naturally a thoughtful kind of a planner type person, or you're more naturally a more impulsive, live in the moment kind of person, that's well and good. But wherever you are in that spectrum, you can still be more intentional because you know we have only a certain number of hours in each day, right? And hopefully we're going to be good stewards, of the time that we're going to be given, and we're going to be thoughtful and intentional about picking those things that are perhaps most important for us to use our time with, and most important could be anything, right? Most important could be to have a time of quiet meditation or a time of thoughtful reflection, or it could be to slow down and spend more time with one of our kids or with our spouse or with a friend, or to pause and help someone in need, right? Um, but also it means looking ahead at our big goals in life and make sure that day to day, right, we're doing those things that will keep us moving in the right direction. So the concept of intentionality has a lot of usefulness to it. And like I said, a lot of people, will be maybe intentional in one or two areas of their life, but kind of random and impulsive in other areas. So we're all learning, and it's a journey that we're all on. So
Definitely. Definitely. I think this is the good part here that we all are learning. It's a journey. It's never late than ever. Um,
yeah,
and you know what, Steve? What kind of is a worrisome aspect here that sometimes we equate our well-being, our success with the external achievements we have, and internally we don't even realize that we are hollow. I mean, we feel or we think, okay, I'm doing good. I am earning this particular figure salary, or I've bought a house, or I am having great lifestyle. This is more than enough for me. I do not need to have any kind of internal feelings within me. I mean, it's not going to help me. But then sometimes unfortunately it becomes really late to realize that
yeah, you're right. I think you mentioned something that affects all of us, right? We have a tendency to live outside in, right? In other words, if our circumstances are going well, we tend to think everything's doing great, right? Because, hey, my job's going pretty well. I don't have any big problems in my family life. Um, and we live outside in. We let that dictate our well being. But therefore, people who live that way, when trials or troubles come, and it's not an if, it's a when, right? We're all going to face trials and tribulations in our life, right? But in those circumstances, sometimes people who live outside in like that have a hard, they're not as resilient. They are surprised when hard times come along. And then all of a sudden, then their world seems dark. When really it's more ideal, perhaps, to think about living a little more inside out, to say, I'm going to develop a mindset or a perspective or a way of thinking that focuses on, A, what's most important, maintaining a sense of awareness and peace and joy. And I'm going to strive to be that way, whatever my circumstances are, right? If times are going good, I'll enjoy them, but I'll focus on gratefulness, right? Rather than assuming that everything is okay. And when times are tough, we won't be overly surprised by them, or we won't be debilitated by them, but instead we will just think, okay, this is part of life. There's still a lot of good things going on, and so I'm gonna manage the situation well and get through it. And I think a lot of it comes down to some of us by nature, but also I think our society and the world sometimes sends us the message that we're supposed to be in control of everything around us. Especially, I spent 38 years in the business world, right? And that way of thinking is encouraged there, right? To think we're supposed to control the circumstances around us. And we're supposed to do all the things we can to control the outcomes of whatever we're working on. And along the way, if we interact with other people, we need to kind of control how they think about things. Well, those are all fallacies, right? We really do not have the ability to absolutely control our circumstances or outcomes or other people. The only things we can control are the thoughts that we encourage and the choices we make, right? We are responsible for our mindset and how we think about things, and whether we allow negative thinking to dominate our point of view, or whether we encourage positive thinking. And we're responsible for the choices we make. But it's not our job to control other people. And when we try to do that, generally we create problems. And yes, we're supposed to do our very best. We're supposed to work hard, be organized, be productive, but ultimately, we don't control the ultimate outcome. We can do the best job we can, and sometimes other circumstances or events or whatever will lead things in another way. So when we learn to kind of let go of that obsession with control, it's one of the biggest secrets to find more peace in our life. To say, okay, I'm just going to do the best I can. I'm going to focus on my attitude and on the choices and actions I take. And that will give me a sense of well-being, and to live that way, as opposed to think we're supposed to run through life and control everybody else and control everything around us. So that concept of letting go of control is a really big step in this journey.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it's really becoming it's about becoming whole, not just achieving goals.
Yeah.
I think, and
Yeah.
and and that's such an important distinction, because although we have so many self improvement plans and resources out there, I think what I believe, and I urge all of the listeners to check out, that I think what you said just right now is what makes steps really different from all the other self improvement plans out there.
Yeah. I love the word whole. You've used that several times. I love that concept of wholeness. I think it's even a more robust thought than the concept of wellness. I love the concept of wellness because it encourages people, if they think about it, to understand that there are different components of wellness, right? Certainly there's our physical health, but and we've mentioned some of them, right? There's emotional and spiritual and social and mental and so forth. So one is it's a holistic integration of those things. Um, but so many people are rushing through life, right? If you're living outside in and you're focused on circumstances, things that you care most about are, A, am I doing well at my job? Am I making enough money? And also the perception of other people, right? Do they think I'm doing a good job? And do they think of that? That's not wholeness, right? That's allowing, other circumstances and outside forces to affect our well-being, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to live in life in a way to be the best me I can be, right? I think that's what excellence is. Excellence is just becoming the best that we can be. It's not perfection. It's not a maniacal, compulsive focus on achievement for achievement's sake. It's having the right balance. to know that emotionally and spiritually and socially and even mentally, right? If I if I'm going about things in a healthy manner, then A, my life will be better. And B, from that place, I'll be better in my relationships and I'll be better at work and I'll be better in all the different aspects of life. You know?
Definitely. Yes, it may sound overwhelming, but I think it's it cannot happen overnight. It's
Yeah.
not some a huge overhaul that has to be done, but with small
Yeah.
consistent steps, we can achieve greater results as well. Not
Yeah.
absolutely too focused on ourselves, but with the process, the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. You alluded a little bit to and I always laugh a little bit. You said something. I'm familiar with the world of addiction, and sometimes when I'm being introduced, right, for a speaking engagement or something like that, you know, people who may not have that in that background aren't quite sure what to say. And I'll just get up and say, "That's right. I'm very experienced in the world of addiction." By that meaning, I haven't just studied it, but for myself, in fact, in my nuclear family it's myself and my wife, and we have two sons. And,
Mhm.
in the United States and even globally, the statistics are not that different. About 1 out of 7 people will have a substance-related addiction at some point in my life of their lives, and in my family, that wasn't the ratio, it was 3 out of 4. I was an alcoholic for many years. Now, I was what you might call a high-functioning alcoholic, right? No, other people didn't really perceive the problem. I still did pretty good at job and I was a husband and a father, but yet I was addicted to alcohol. It was more in control of me than I was of it. My wife had issues as well, and it got darkest with my older son when he was in his young teens, and he went on a journey that was very dark for a good number of years. But, in the world of recovery, right, uh, that was a lot of, I think, the inspiration, that led me to do what I do now, right? I saw people in recovery who had suffered significant trauma from, either certainly from themselves, but also sometimes from people around them, who may have an addiction of some sort. And, one of the basic precepts in recovery is, you don't have to change your entire life today, right? You can take it a step at a time. And that is such a feeling of release when you accept that because it seems daunting and you use the word overwhelming, right? It seems overwhelming to think, I can't change my whole life today. Well, the good news is you don't have to, just take small steps in the right direction. And since, writing books and starting steps, right, we research a lot of areas, certainly the world of recovery, the world of spirituality, but also psychology and neuroscience and wellness and personal development. And one of the most well accepted, well proven concepts in life is that you can transform your life one small step at a time. It shows up in all of those disciplines if you look for it. And it's really a nice feeling, to think today, whether circumstances are good or bad, I don't have to fix everything today. I just want to pick the right direction and take steps in that. So a lot of that original impetus and many of the principles we use actually came out of the world of recovery because, as I said, I think everybody's addicted to something and everybody needs recovery, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, lovely, lovely, Steve. So before we wrap up this powerful conversation, if our listeners would like to connect with you, explore more about Steps Ministries, get a hold of your books and your podcast as well, what is the best way to do that?
The easiest way would be to start with our website, which is lifeimprovementsteps.com. In other words, lifeimprovementsteps.com. There, very quickly, you can see information for individuals to deal with behavioral health problems, either mental health or substance issues for themselves or someone in their family. You see a section called Life Improvement, right, where we have resources. Guess what? We do have online resources for living intentionally, for being productive, for improving your relationships. We have also a set of resources for parents. We do a lot with parents because I was inspired not only to help people, wait until their lives come apart because of these problems we bring on ourselves, but to kind of get upstream of that. And maybe by living life the right way is prevent some of those things from happening. So we work a lot with parents. So those resources are there. There's a contact us button there. You can see information about the books, but anyone can go there and see a lot of free resources they could do it. I'd ask you while you're there, sign up for the blog, and once a week, you'll get some useful information to help you take steps to live life better, one day at a time. So,
Lovely, lovely. I'll make sure to have all the links and details in the show notes, Steve. And thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, and practical wisdom, not just the uh, kind of super optimistic or super positive false optimism in there. I think what I can feel is your work is such a beautiful reminder, especially in today's context, that no matter where we are in life, we have that choice to take the next right step. And that intentional living, it is a journey, it is not a destination.
yeah. Well, son, I enjoyed our conversation. Like I said, we obviously share a lot of thoughts. So I love what you do, and I'm sure you're helping lots of people, and I'm glad I could be a small part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve, who's out there. I hope that you are taking some golden nuggets from encourage all of you. Check out Steps Ministries, Steve's books, wonderful resources on his website, and and take something away from there, and take this conversation as your green signal or a permission to start. And until next time, stay mindful, stay intentional, and keep taking those small baby steps toward the life that you want. Thank you.